to At the Glass. I'm your host, Mark. Before we dive into week 3 recap of the college football season, I am going to touch base on the beverage I am drinking and give you a little background like I did on the previous one. This time around, it is not a whiskey, it's a tequila I am drinking, and that tequila is a El Tequileno Reposado. It is where one is on the kick now, additive free, so there's no extra flavors added in or anything like that along the lines. So all the flavors are natural from being distilled and being used 100% agave plants. And there at the distillery, this tequila started in 1959 by Don Jorge Salas Cuervo. Pursued his dream opening it up, and he calls it El Tequileno to honor the birthplace of tequila. Like I said, I'm drinking the Reposado. In order for it to be a Reposado, the tequila must be aged in oak barrel for a minimum of 2 months. Where this one, being the Reposado from them, it has been aged roughly 3 months in American oak, and it's full agave flavor. And it's grown on me very quickly. I just had it for the first time last week, and it is very flavorful. And honestly, I think it is one of the best bang for your bucks tequila out there right now for roughly $25. So don't let the price of it being $25 seem like, oh, it's cheap. It's bottom of the barrel. It's very tasty. It could be consumed by in a margarita, ranch water, drinking neat like I'm doing, or on the rocks, however you prefer it. But it is a very tasty tequila. Just smelling it, smells very vanilla, natural smell of vanilla from the American oak there. And just being the agave itself that gives it off after being distilled and put into the American oak barrels to give it the Reposado. It's a very light Reposado. Like you wouldn't think it is, but it is. It's very, very light color for being a Reposado. The taste, I do get the hints of oak from drinking bourbon and whiskey and scotch and stuff. I get that. And like I said, it has to be barreled at least 2 months in American oak. But it says cooked agave. I never have had cooked agave before, or if I have no idea it was that. But if that's what a cooked agave is, then sign me up, because it is delicious. Like I said, so drink however you want to with it. Like I said, it's an awesome tequila. They do have the Blanco, and then they have a Añejo and a higher end Reposado that they made that's a little bit more in the $50 up to $80 range in there for their other tequilas. But this one that I'm drinking, just the Reposado, $25. Can't go wrong with it if you're into tequila or making margaritas. So that's what I'm drinking. If you're feeling thirsty, get after it. Until then, let's dive into the week 3 recap from the school that I am currently keeping up to date with, whether that's where I went to school, where my wife went to school, or family members or friends went to school. And so starting with my school, Sam Houston State Bearcats, they hosted Hawaii this past weekend. And for them, it was one of their largest home crowds there in Huntsville, of 15,134 fans. You might say, well, that doesn't seem like a whole lot of people for being a college football, Division I FBS school. I get that, but you gotta understand where Sam came from, being FCS school for many, many years, becoming known. They did win their national championship, but just getting the home crowd involved and growing it still, and people are excited, and I think more things are going to come with that. I mean, they're renovating the field, and so the fact that they had pretty much a sellout crowd, according to them, which was awesome. And I was watching the game, most of it, and it looked like the crowd was into it. Everyone was enjoying the game, and so that's where Bauer Stadium could continue to grow, and we look forward to the new growth coming that way. Like I said, so the Bearcats hosted Hawaii. They won 31-13. With that win, brings the Bearcats record to 2-1 on the season. The Bearcats came out ready to play and bounced back after last week's being manhandled by Central Florida. Bearcats jumped out to a quick 7-0 lead on the opening possession of the game to set the tone for the rest of the game. Quarterback Hunter Watson threw for 165 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception while rushing for 45 yards. Jay Ducker was one of the 2 standouts on the offense side of the ball for the Bearcats. Ducker rushed for 148 yards on 15 carries. It was nice to see Sam get the running game going and capitalize on the big running lanes created by the line. And the other main standout on the offense was Humphreys at wide receiver, who had 100 receiving yards and 2 touchdown receptions. On the defensive side, they smothered Hawaii, held Hawaii to only 56 total rushing yards and passing to 252 total yards. Congrats to Caleb Weaver for being named Conference USA Defensive Player of the Week. Weaver had an interception and broke up 3 passes. Weaver also is currently tied for the team lead in both tackles and pass breakups through the first 3 games of the season for the Bearcats. The Bearcats will open up Conference USA play this Saturday when they host New Mexico State Aggies, who are 1-2 overall in the season and 0-1 in conference. The game is taking place in Huntsville. So hopefully another big crowd this weekend out there. As far as the game itself, Bearcats are favored by 16.5, and that is partially due to that New Mexico State is currently 130th in all FBS for total offense and 120th in total for defense. If they come out strongly like they did at Hawaii, they should be able to take care of business at home again and start off strong in their first conference game of the season. Now we're going to move on to the Baylor Bears. They hosted Air Force in Waco this past Saturday, and the way they played on the first half, you would think they have shaken off the Saturday scaries from the previous week. That wasn't the case. Anytime the offense would get things moving on a drive, they would hurt themselves. In 3 consecutive possessions, the Bears turned the ball over on whether it was on downs. Then they had back-to-back fumbles when driving. Fortunately, there are 2 halves in football so far for the Bears. Bears weren't scared in the second half, so the Saturday scares seemed to have moved out of the way for the second half for the Bears. Bears came out on offense and moved the ball better and distanced themselves from Air Force for a 31-3 win. Sawyer Robertson started for the injured Daquan Finn, who is currently out with the shoulder injury. Robertson threw for 248 yards and had 1 rushing touchdown. Bryson Washington led the way at running back with 106 rushing yards and 1 touchdown. Defense had their hands full with the Air Force option run, allowing 193 total rushing yards. Not much passing by Air Force for the Bears secondary to be tested. I think they only threw the ball like 3 times total the whole game. Air Force did. So, yeah. Baylor goes on the road this week to go play Colorado to open a Big 12 play. Bears will need to shake off their slow starts and come out with urgency against Prime Time's team, who are currently 2-1 on the season. Colorado is 73rd in total offense and 88th in total defense. This game is winnable for the Bears. We'll need to do better job not turning the ball over and limiting Sanders on making big plays with his arm and containing Hunter when he's at wide receiver. Colorado is currently favored by 2. So if the Bears can keep doing what they do on defense and the offense can minimize having no costly turnovers or mistakes on their end, they could come out of Boulder there with a victory. We're going to now move on to Texas Longhorns. Like I said, they are the new number 1 team in the nation after this past weekend. UT was home over the weekend, and they hosted UTSA, where they easily routed the Roadrunners with a 56-7 win, moving them to 3-0 in the season. However, the win did come at a cost. Quinn Ewers exited the game in the second quarter after suffering a non-contact injury. Before leaving the game, Ewers threw for 185 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. With Ewers out of the game, that meant it was Manning time. Arch Manning came in and picked up where Ewers left off. Manning dazzled in what was the most playing time yet. Manning threw 223 yards, 4 touchdowns, while showing off his wheels, which his uncles lacked in their Hall of Fame careers. Manning had a rushing touchdown that was 67 yards. And speaking of the running game, Jarrett Gibson led the team in rushing yards with 75 yards. As for wide receiver, Ryan Wingo had 127 receiving yards, 1 touchdown, and Isaiah Bond had 103 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. Defense for the Longhorns made it very difficult for the Roadrunners to do anything on offense, holding them to a total of 260 yards. Ethan Burke had an interception for the Longhorns. I saw today with anyway, I'll get there very shortly. With Ewers being questionable for this week's game against Louisiana Monroe with an abdomen injury, we might get to see Manning make his first career start at QB for the Longhorns this week in Austin. And then I saw today they did announce that Manning will be the starter for this weekend against Louisiana Monroe. Like I said, everyone take an opponent for granted, but if the Longhorns continue to play like they have been on both sides of the ball, this game should be under wraps fairly early. Longhorns are favored by 44.5 points. Next, we're moving to the Aggies, Texas A&M. The Aggies hit the road to take on the Florida Gators this past weekend, looking to win their first road game in 3 years. The Aggies did just that, routing the Gators 33-20 to move to 2-1 and 1-0 in conference on the year. Marcel Reed got the start at QB for the Aggies as Wegman was dealing with an upper body injury. Wegman was suited up as backup QB for this game in case Marcel went down with an injury. Marcel had a dominating showing for his first collegiate start with the Aggies, while remaining calm throughout the entire game. He accounted for 3 touchdowns, throwing for 2 and rushing for the other. Reed finished with 178 passing yards and 83 rushing yards. Aggies had 310 rushing yards as a team. Levon Moss led the team with 110 of those yards. Cyrus Allen led the way at wide receiver with 81 receiving yards and 1 touchdown. The Aggies defense held the run game in check, only allowing 52 total rushing yards. The Gators were able to move the ball on the Aggies defense through the air a little bit with 249 total passing yards. However, the Aggies did have 3 interceptions. One of those interceptions has been returned for a TD by Bryce Anderson. Javon Thomas and Marcel Ratcliffe each had a pick. 2 sacks, 5 tackles for a loss for the defense as well. Aggies will host Bowling Green, who played Penn State very closely 2 weeks ago. Whether it's Wegman or Reed, I have not seen who they announced for starting this weekend. But either way, whether it's Wegman or Reed behind center this weekend, both will continue to build up the offense and keep it rolling. Defense will do what they have been doing, and that is smothering the opponent's run game. They have been very dominant at keeping opponent's run game to a minimum. Aggies are favored by 23 points. I know that's fluctuated by the time I did all this stuff. I think it's around 23 still, 22.5 either way. So 3 touchdowns at minimum. Next, we're going to move to the Oklahoma Sooners. Boomer Sooner. The Sooners moved to 3-0 in the season after defeating Tulane 34-19. OU offense was able to move the ball on offense a little easier this go-around, totaling for 349 yards on offense. Jackson Arnold threw for 169 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, while leading the rushing game with 97 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. Taylor Tatum had 1 rushing touchdown and a receiving touchdown as well. And Deion Burks led the wide receiver core with 80 receiving yards on the game. The Sooners defense held Tulane to 279 total yards, Mason Thomas had a big game on defense for the Sooners. Thomas accounted for 3 sacks, forced fumble, and a fumble recovery, and a pass breakup as well. Billy Bowman Jr. had an interception as well, and OU will need to sustain drives and score touchdowns as they host a highly productive Tennessee team this upcoming weekend. This will be the first time the Sooners are a touchdown home underdog since November 21st, 1998, when they hosted Texas Tech. Next season, Bob Stoops took over at that time. So, take it a little farther. A ranked OU football team has not been an underdog at home of more than 4 points since at least 1978. So we'll see on Saturday if the home crowd for the Sooners will be a factor to bring them a victory against the Tennessee Vols. I don't know, the head coach for Tennessee was at OU. He was the quarterback when they won the national championship when Bob Stoops took over, and he was their offensive coordinator early on, but he was dismissed after a rough year on the offense, but now he's doing very well with Tennessee. We're going to now go talk about the LSU Tigers. The Tigers traveled to South Carolina to take on the Gamecocks. Tigers scratched and clawed their way back into the game after being down 17-0 early in the game. After Nussmeier directed a final drive late that resulted in a touchdown with a minute and 12 seconds left in the game to give the Tigers a 36-33 lead and a victory over the Gamecocks. Nussmeier had several miscues, one being an interception at the goal line on the previous possession before they scored the go-ahead touchdown. That did not stop Nussmeier. He was ready to get back out there and lead the offense. Nussmeier ended the game with 285 passing yards, so the 2 touchdowns and 1 interceptions. As for the running game, the Tigers seemed to have found a little bit of that. As a team, the Tigers rushed for 132 yards. Caden Durham led the team with 98 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. Aaron Anderson led the wide receiver group in receiving yards with 96, while Kyrene Lacey and Mason Taylor each had a receiving touchdown. Defense was solid in the secondary, only allowing 155 passing yards, and had 1 interception by Zy Alexander. As for the run defense, Gamecocks were having a field day with running. Gamecocks racked up 243 rushing yards on the ground. However, defense pressure on the QB made up for it with 5 sacks on the game, Braden Swinson having 3 of those sacks as well. By all means, this game was not pretty for the Tigers, but they did find a way to win and move to 2-1 and 1-0 in conference on the season. The Tigers will host UCLA this weekend. LSU will now have played both schools from Los Angeles. Tigers are favored by 24 points. So that's the recap from week 3 for the schools that have ties to. As far as just a quick overview from the top 10, the current top 10 rankings now. How they fared. So Texas being number 1, like I said, they discussed earlier, they won easily over UTSA 56-7. Georgia won a nail biter against Kentucky 13-12. Ohio State Buckeyes were off. Alabama, number 4, blew out Wisconsin 42-10. Number 5, Ole Miss handled Wake Forest with ease 40-6. Number 6, Missouri played a very close game against Boston College. Missouri came away with a 27-21 win. The Vols with an easy win over Kent State, 71-0. 37 points in the first quarter by Tennessee. They could have started their third stringers and still won. Nothing against Kent State, but yeah, it was pretty much over from the moment the ball was kicked off. Number 8, Penn State was off. Number 9, Oregon. It was close in the first half with their little brother. I say little brother. They played Oregon State. In the second half, they pulled away and won 49-14. And then number 10, Miami, was an easy, smooth win over Ball State with a 62-0 victory. So yeah, that was the week 3 recap of college football here and who they are playing this upcoming weekend. So should be a good matchup overall with all the schools playing, and should be a fun weekend of football as always. So for those that cheer on your team, go get them, and we'll see if all our schools we cheer for come out with wins. So if you have any questions or just feel like shooting me anything, feel free to do so at my email. It's at atheglasspodcast@gmail.com. So that is at atheglasspodcast@gmail.com. And I will do another recap after this weekend for week 4, and it should be good. Until then, we be sipping, and I will catch y'all later.